Romulus was a warlike king. He loved war, and in fact, that's how founded Rome. He founded Rome through, you can say, war. And even after founding the city, the way he dealt with the neighboring cities and nations was through war most of the time. For him, the solution to almost every problem he had, especially with the neighboring cities and city-states and dominions, was through war. Now, when Numa Pompilius became the king, he decided to pursue a different path. Now, we still going through the book from the founding of the city by Titus Livius, or Livy. The book is often referred to as History of Rome. Now, if you've not, I welcome you to subscribe to my channel. And in this channel, we explore ancient texts. We try to get interesting stories from ancient texts. And I mean texts that are like thousands of years old, even 5,000-6,000 of years old, the text that we can get, of course. So if you've not subscribed, please do so that you will get notified every time I upload a video. And of course, that will also help me reach a wider audience. Now, as I've said, Romulus was a warlike king, but when Numa Pompilius comes to power, Numa Pompilius does something very different. He decides he's not going to use war, at least not when it's not really needed. And he starts laying down a new foundation for the city. And I found this to be so interesting because reading through several ancient texts, something has slowly become very clear in my mind. And I've mentioned this in another videos. I think that my assumption had always been that religion and state were not necessarily one and the same thing. They've always needed to be separated. But now I'm realizing that religion and state have always been one and the same thing. And in fact, it's so hard to separate the two. Now, Numa Pompilius seems to have recognized this, and he recognized that if he didn't make Rome religious, the city was going to have problems going forward. So Numa Pompilius decides, I'm going to lay down a foundation of law, of course, law and order, and statutes and observances, rituals, and things people should be doing under specific conditions or when they are supposed to do one or the other. And so through that process that is trying to build a stable city, he makes it very religious. He makes Rome very religious, and that ends up making it achieving several things that we're going to see in this video and some in videos that come by. So Livy also tells us that Numa Pompilius understood that if he wanted the city to be organized, especially in terms of peace, because for him his goal was to make the city organized both in terms of war and in terms of peace. Romulus had done a very good job at making the city very organized in terms of war, but Numa Pompilius didn't expect that there was going always to be war. So he decided if this city was going to be organized even in terms of peace, then something needed to be done. And he decided whatever he was going to do was not going to be done during war. So the first thing he does, he goes and he talks to the neighboring dominions and he seeks peace. Livy tells us he goes, he talks to most of the neighboring cities and dominions and nations, and he succeeds at getting peace treaties with these nations. Now, when that is done, he comes back, and one of the first things he does is to build a temple for god Janus. And there is a reason he did this. Now, this temple became very like a symbol of peace and war. When there was peace, this temple remained closed when there is peace. When there was war, this temple would be opened. And I was trying to understand the logic behind it. It's like he was trying to create this general understanding in the population that there was going to be times of war and times of peace, opposite of what the society had understood under the leadership of Romulus, where it was like every day is time of war. So he was trying to create this understanding in the minds. That's my interpretation, at least. Maybe that's not what it was, but how I interpret it is he was trying to make the people understand there are times of war and times of peace. So he built this temple, which will be closed during times of peace and open during times of war. And then he goes ahead and here is another thing I need to explain before I go even further to explore how Numa Pompilius makes Rome very religious. So he decides if there is going to be peace, then there is a new problem. And the problem, Livy tells us, is that if there is peace, people then less and less start fearing war. And when people less and less start, like they no longer fear war, then they may become extravagant and idle. That's how Livy describes it. And Numa Pompilius considered that to be a problem, and he decided to replace that fear of war with another fear. And the fear he replaced it with is fear of heaven, as Livy describes it. And now the fear of heaven is religion. And now he has built this Temple of Janus. He also started telling this interesting story to the population. Because he understood that for them to believe him, he had to find a way to explain some of these things. And he started telling the story that he was having nocturnal meetings with goddess Egeria, and that he was having these meetings with this goddess, and it is this goddess that was telling him to set up these issues around religion and rituals and things that people need to do. And it kept telling this story, and people started believing. The population starts believing that indeed Numa Pompilius is meeting this goddess Egeria and is getting instructions from this goddess, and these instructions also come from other gods. Yeah? And he goes ahead, he appoints priests to handle spiritual matters. Of course, the way Livy describes it, Numa Pompilius as a king was taking care of some of the responsibilities of priesthood, but he decided that he needed to get more people to help with that. So he appoints priests for Jupiter, priests for Mars, priests for Quirinus, and other gods. He also kind of like finds, you can call it an order of virgins called the Virgins for Vesta, which I guess is another god or goddess. And this is a group of women who will remain virgins, and then they will serve as priestesses and at some temples or in some temples. And then he even had he set aside a budget that will come from the public treasury to take care of these people who had been appointed as priests and as virgins for Vesta, things like that. And he also, this guy was so meticulous in the way he was trying to organize religion in Rome. He even came up with a distinct dress code for the priests, including embroidered tunics, as Livy tells us, and bronze breastplates and things like that. He was so detailed in the way he wanted all these rituals to happen in the city that he even had to take care of how these priests and priestesses were to dress. He also appoints somebody by the name Numa Marcius. I don't know whether it was a relative, but Livy tells us it was a son of Marcus, one of the senators. He appoints him to be a pontifex. A pontifex, like kind of like the head of the priest or something like that, I'm guessing. But his main job was to write in detail instructions of how everything should be done when it comes to religious rituals. So he had to write the rites that have to be performed during worship. He had to write the type of animals that need to be sacrificed and how they need to be sacrificed, the specific rituals that have to be done in specific days, temples that have to be used for specific rituals, including even the sources of money that need to be used for specific religious purposes. That's how detailed Numa Pompilius was, that he appointed this guy whose main job was to come with very detailed manual on how religious rites have to be undertaken. Even funerals, he's the one now who came up with how funerals should be undertaken when somebody has passed. So Numa Pompilius, by doing all these things, his goal, as I've said, was to have more peace in society and to also take care of problems that arise when there is peace. It seems like he's a guy who didn't really like war. I'll read something that Livy writes about Numa Pompilius and his goal or his objective of making Rome more religious so that it's more peaceful. He says, not only had they something to occupy their minds, but their constant preoccupation with the gods, now that it seemed to them that concern for human affairs was felt by the heavenly powers, had so tinged the hearts of all with the piety that the nation was governed by its regard for promises and oaths rather than by the dread of laws and punishment. So he did achieve whatever he wanted to achieve. At the end of it, he made Rome very religious. And looking at some of the things that he put in place, I'm tempted to think some of them we have remnants of those in modern day Christianity, I think, especially when it comes to Catholic organization and rituals. I think we still have remnants of those in that faith. I'm tempted to think so. Maybe I'm wrong though. But I was reading that and I was thinking like, maybe we have remnants of this practice that started with Numa Pompilius. Another thing that was kind of like made more firm in my mind is the understanding that state and religion have always been one and the same thing, or they've always complemented each other. Like state needs religion for the cohesion and organization of society. And of course, religion might need state for its propagation and growth.